Good afternoon. I'm Joyce Morgan Young, a member of the Azalea Committee, and on behalf of LSPA, I'll bring you a story. As we've all been at home lately enjoying being sheltered from the COVID-19, we think of home. And as we think of home, we might drift to the thought of our permanent home or our permanent resting place. Several years ago, my husband Bill and I decided that it would be wise for us to find a permanent resting place, and we considered our options. One is the lovely columbarium of First United Methodist Church in LaGrange, where we're members. You know, they have little drawers that they can put you in and put your dates there on a little brass plaque, and they keep the gate locked all the time, too. Only family members who have a little drawer have a key to the gate. There's also Danville, Illinois, where Bill is from and where his parents are buried in a mausoleum. It's a long way off, over 700 miles. And then there's Macedonia Baptist Church, one of the oldest Baptist churches in the state of Georgia, in Jackson, Georgia, my hometown. So after much deliberation and some debate, we agreed that we would go to Jackson. And on a Saturday morning, we got up in LaGrange, had our breakfast, drove through Mountville, Greenville, Alberton, Griffin, got to Interstate 75, crossed it, and there was the welcoming sign that the county commissioners had put up, and it said, "Welcome to beautiful Butts," in very large letters, and county written very small below. They were so proud of their sign that had even appeared on the Jay Leno show one night when he had a good laugh at showing off "Welcome to beautiful Butts." I was past 50 before I admitted anybody I was from Butts County, but you get to a certain age and you might as well join the laughter because it was named for a revolutionary soldier and I'm sure an honorable fellow. We continued past that sign, went through Jackson, east of Jackson to the Hallsbridge Road, and we turned north. 3 miles up Hallsbridge Road and then right into God's country, over the Morgan Road. We went down that dirt road to the 1890 farmhouse where my father and mother lived and where I had been raised. My sister, Linda, 2 years older also. She now lived at the farm. She had built a home several years earlier. As we drove around the driveway, I looked up at the kitchen window and there was my mom. Always I knew she'd be there. But by the time we were parked in the backyard, she and Daddy were down the steps and out to greet us. Daddy was just ready to go. "Oh, Joyce, we've got to go. We've got to go. Mr. Phillip is right there waiting on us." Mr. Phillip Bunch, the cemetery chair of Macedonia Baptist Church. And Bill, who always has a way of knowing the right thing to do, went on in the house with Mother, feigning that he really needed a cup of coffee. Daddy and I got in his truck. We headed up to the church. Now, my daddy is a talker. He talks all of the time. He talked all the way up there, talking how happy he was that I was coming home, that I was going to be buried there. Thought maybe he wouldn't be around when that happened, but he just thought that was the right thing. And finally, I was coming back to Macedonia Baptist. Well, we got there, got out of the truck, and there's Mr. Phillips standing there in the churchyard waiting on us, and we're the only ones there. And he said, "Oh, Miss Joyce, I am so happy that you're coming home." "Oh, I am, Mr. Phillip, but not soon, not soon." We entered into the cemetery, a pre-Civil War cemetery, and we walked to the fourth row and stopped to pay a little bit of a nod to the Morgan plot where my grandmother and granddaddy Morgan were. I have an uncle that was already there, a couple of babies, but a big lot and plenty space for others. But we continued on our way and we got to row 8 and, well, there's McClellan. My sister's Linda Morgan McClellan. We continued on and finally stopped on row 13. And Mr. Phillips said, "Now, Miss Joyce, I know this is a little distant, but, we got a lot of folks liking our cemetery now. So, but the good thing is little Joyce is in row 14, and she's catty-cornered." Little Joyce is my namesake and my sister's daughter. So I was initially just crestfallen. But I also know that to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord, and it was only going to be my body there, and if they just put my feet toward the church and my head looking that way, I guess it'd just be okay. So I said, well, this will be fine, Mr. Phillip. Now, how much do I owe you? And he said, well, that'll be $200. So I'm thinking, well, that's pretty good, pretty good. Now, my father, as I mentioned earlier, who talks all the time and had been talking all of the time, had suddenly become quiet. Phillip, were you at the charge conference? Well, yes, sir, I was, Mr. Otha. Did you hear the conversation about the cemetery? Well, Mr. Otha, I'm the cemetery chair. Of course I did. I thought maybe you had forgotten. Oh, no. The lots are $200. Phillip, if Joyce would like this lot, and I'd like her to have it, and make her mom and me mighty happy, if she wants this lot, it's $1,000. Well, I don't know who was more surprised, Phillip or me. But we both were speechless now. And my daddy proceeds to say, Phillip, I don't think you understand. Phillip, still silent, says, no, sir, Mr. Morgan. You remember what we said in that charge conference? That for members and maybe some family members, it's $200 a lot. But for outsiders, the price is $1,000. But Mr. Otha, Miss Joyce is not an outsider. Why, she grew up in this church. Her grandparents are right up there. Her sister's over there. You and I are going to be out here someday, too. Oh, no, she's certainly not an outsider. Phillip, you don't understand. Joyce is a Methodist. And so I am. And Phillip said, well, I don't know what to say, Miss Joyce. And my daddy turned on his heels and pranced himself right out of the cemetery, going past 8 and 4 and on out, and he went over across the road and got in the truck and slammed the door. And Phillip and I are still standing there. And Phillip says, Miss Joyce, I can't go against Mr. Otha. You know, he was my Sunday school teacher when I was a boy. And I will tell you, I don't really think like he does on this, but if you want this plot, it's $1,000. And I said, well, Phillip, I'll mail you a check on Monday. And I turned on my heels, and Mr. Phillip did too. But when we got to row 8, I turned and I looked at that McClellan headstone, and I did a very unladylike thing, and I went because I knew that Linda Morgan McClellan, who did not go to Macedonia Baptist anymore while she had up and gone to First Baptist in Jackson, that she had not paid 1 red cent. I mean, she didn't even pay the $200. She got hers free. We walked on. I kind of nodded over at row 4. I didn't want to totally disrespect my grandmother and my granddaddy Morgan, but we walked on and walked across the road and right up next to the truck, and Mr. Phillip said, I always like to see you, Miss Joyce. I got in the truck, and what had been a warm spring day was now an icy cold day. My talkative father wasn't opening his mouth, nor was I. We headed down the Macedonia Baptist Church Road. He didn't even turn on the radio, which he always does. We got to the Otha Morgan Road, and he turned in, and he turned the truck off and stopped and turned in his seat and looked at me and said, "Joyce, now I'd really like you to have that plot. But you know, right is right. You're a Methodist. This is a Baptist cemetery." He started the truck and we rode in silence till we got home, because I couldn't think of anything to say. We went in the house and Mother and Bill are just sitting there laughing, having a grand old time, and I thought, wish I'd stayed home and sent him. But I made some excuse and said, you know, we had hoped that we'd be able to stay a long time, but we really have got to get back. And I could see that my mother was really disappointed. And so we stayed just through lunch, but then we left because I just was in no mood for visiting. And as soon as we got in our car, and before we even got to the Hallsbridge Road, I had filled Bill Young's ear with a mouthful. You will not believe what he did. We got up there, and I was going to pay $200, and all of a sudden, because we're Methodist, we've now got to pay $1,000. And my husband had the lack of good sense to laugh. I was not laughing. On Monday, I sent a check and a letter, "Dear Mr. Bunch, enclosed, please find a check for $1,000 for the lot on Row 13, adjacent to Joyce McClellan." And I copied that letter to my mother and my daddy because I wanted my mother to know what my daddy had done. Time passed. Mother said one day, "You know, Joyce, I got your letter about the cemetery, and I don't agree, but you know I'm not going to cross your daddy." Well, years went on, and we'd be at a family gathering, and somebody'd say, "Oh, hey, Joyce, tell us about the cemetery," and I'd tell them. They'd all laugh, and Linda was getting the biggest laugh of all of this. We got a new preacher. Daddy was in the hospital. Linda and I were there with Daddy, and new preacher came in, and Linda said, "Oh, Joyce, tell the new preacher about the cemetery." So I told it, and my daddy said, "Now, did I do that?" And I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Right, still right, Joyce." Well, time passed, and one day I got a call from my sister. She and my father had been in a wreck in Macon. He was 95 by this time, on his way to the dermatologist, talking, of course, when a 22-year-old ran out in front of him, texting, and Linda T-boned the car, and the airbag came out. And having a 95-year-old in the front seat's like having a baby in the front seat. And Daddy was in the trauma unit of the Macon Hospital, and I was called and told to come. But as we were driving over there, I got a call from Linda saying, "Just go on home to the farm. Daddy passed." And so the next day at Linda's house, she said, "I can tell you something kind of funny." I didn't think there was anything funny in the world, not anything. She said, "Yesterday they asked me if I wanted a chaplain." And I said, "Oh yeah, that'd be really nice." She said Daddy was still talking, you know, but I think the internal injuries were just so bad. But the chaplain came in, handsome young man, handsome. Oh, he had a wonderful prayer, and Daddy seemed so pleased. And Daddy died just shortly after that prayer. But you know what, Joyce? That chaplain was Methodist. And I thought, right is right.